So in this video, we're going to be doing a complete edit of a photo inside Luminar NEO. We've been talking a lot about what this new version can do and what's not really working well so far. Meaning taking a picture that is already well exposed and taken, but that is missing something more. And you're going to see by the end how we got from this to this. Yeah, man, in this channel I help with the tech tools to be creative. So let's dive into NEO and we're gonna edit in some sort of unscripted way. But of course later this video is gonna be edited so that I don't waste your time with waiting or attempts that didn't really work, but I'm gonna explain everything that I'm doing, what works and what not. Let's do it. Okay, so I already imported the picture inside NEO. I just clicked add photos and I added this picture from Valencia. And as you can see, it's a blue hour picture that is already quite nice, but that has nothing really attractive going on. So I think it has a lot of potential, but it's still missing that extra touch. Let's just go directly into edit and let's take a look at what we can do. First of all, I'm just going to crop it and I'm going to make it straight. I can also use the horizon alignment. Let's see what's gonna do. No, it's not working that well. So let's just see, let's make it around here more or less. That looks good. And one of the first things that I like to do is just pushing up the accent AI to have an idea on where can we take this picture. And as you can see, it's really pushing up the brightness in the lower part, a bit the vibrance, saturation. So let me just dial this down again. And let's just go directly to this develop raw module and see what can we do around here. So I'm just going to reduce a little bit the highlights to make the sky pop a little bit and recover a little bit of those clouds, even if I think we're probably gonna replace the sky later on. Okay. Shadows, we can see that we can still bring some detail lower here back. Smart contrast, it really gives it a pop. Exposure is fine for now. On the curves, I'm just going to include a very light S curve here for now. And now the color part is really subjective, but what I usually like to do is that I don't really like this mix of purples and blues and the yellow. I really want to make some color contrast, meaning that I prefer to take everything to a little bit more bluish side and then force the yellows and the orange tones against it later on. So I'm just going to leave it as it is right now. I'm going to include a little bit more of vibrance, and vibrance is going to try to compensate for the colors that are a little bit behind in saturation and try to put everything more or less at the same level. If you just pump up saturation, it's just going to take all the colors all together up and it just makes it really, really strong. So in this case, I'm just taking up the vibrance a little bit and I'm gonna keep it at that. So for sharpness, it already looks pretty good, but I'm just going to add a little bit more. Now, I'm not going to add any noise reduction because I already shot this with the tripod and a very low shutter speed to keep the ISO at a minimum. And it's already ISO 100, so I'm not going to touch that. Now, this is one of the things that I still didn't get used very well, which is every time that you go away and you come back, everything that you edited is going to be back to zero because now the edits on the develop module are on the edits tab. So I'm just going to continue from here. And optics compensate for the auto distortion. This was shot at a 14mm, so it's really good to use this. No defringing, no need. And I really like that we also have the option to further adjust the lens distortion, but I'm just going to leave it as it was. Okay, so far as the develop module, I'm just going to leave it as it is. And let's just go back here and see what structure AI can do for this. So adding a little bit of clarity for sure is gonna make the structure pop a little bit more here on the right. Let's see what it does. Yeah, definitely, but it's a little bit too much, so I'm just gonna leave it down here for a while. Okay, so now in color, I'm just gonna open the HSL panel and I'm gonna do exactly what I said before, meaning that I'm just gonna push the purples and the magentas a little bit more towards the bluish hues, the blue a little bit farther from the purple and more into the cyans. And this is totally a personal choice, but the only thing that you need to understand here is that I'm trying to force these colors to be a little bit more contrasting, meaning that they're going to be opposites in the color chart. So I'm taking all the hues that are around the purple, magentas, more towards the blues, and I'm gonna take now all the yellows, meaning the lights over there, more towards an orangey hue like this. Yeah. And now I'm gonna go over to the saturation and I'm going to push up a little bit on the oranges. And now you can see that I'm really pushing the colors of the lights inside there, which is already looking really cool. gonna push the yellows here a little bit, and also we have to pay attention that I'm also affecting the sky over there. I can make the blues a little bit deeper by pushing them in like this, which I really like. Okay, so let's take a quick look on how it was before and so far. Okay, so we already improved a lot. Maybe it's a little bit too saturated right now, but we'll take a look at that a little bit further on. Now let's see what this detail sharpening can do for us. And definitely makes it much sharper, but at the cost of adding a little bit of noise. So let's just make it, I don't know, 20. And let's see how it looks before, with it and without it. With it and without it. It's very subtle, but it's really nice. Okay, so actually this is taken away. Okay, that is looking pretty good. So let's just see here. Landscape, there are some things that probably I don't need, but let's just see what it's going to do. Golden hour really pushes the colors a little bit more. And actually it does give a little bit of punch to this image that it didn't have before. Not very much, but I'm just going to leave it like that. And yeah, it kind of helped also. Now vignetting is something that I really like to use to call more attention to the subject of the image, especially in this case that it's like really central. But I'm going to do the same using a different tool, which is the Relight AI, because I do not want to add that much vignette on the top part over here. And even though we have some extra controls here to check the roundness, feather and everything like that, I don't have the power to move it around too much. So I'm just going to leave it as it is and come to Relight. And now in the brightness near, I want to push this down a little bit. Also to hide a little the bottom and the details that we had here below the water that I don't really want to show. And I'll just add a little bit more to the brightness far. Okay, now it's looking pretty good. Okay, so before we proceed, let's just change the sky already, see what matches our picture. So in this case, the sun was already gone. So let me check sunset clouds. And I'm just gonna cycle through a little bit here to see what matches best. And probably this one is the one that makes most sense. But actually also this one looks pretty good. Yeah, so this matches a little bit better the colors that we were intending for our picture, but this matches a little bit better with the time of the day and what it should actually look like. What it does is the selecting of the sky that usually is quite precise, and I really like also how it relightens the rest of the scene to make it match. So regarding the position orientation, I'm not gonna change this. It's looking fine like this. And scene relighting is something that I really like to play with to understand if I have to add a little bit more of the colors from the sky into the rest of the scene. Like this, for example, is a little bit too extreme, but it does look nice. And if you go back and you don't relight at all your scene, check how it really creates a halo around the subject here. So I'm definitely going to add a little bit of relight strength. So let's leave it at 20 more or less. Okay, it's looking pretty good. Reflection amount, especially in this case, we definitely need the reflection to be seen on the water down here. And if I just pump it up to 100, now you can see it also on the bottom part here. And if I leave it at 0, it's just going to be blank, so it doesn't make much sense. So let's just go slowly and see until where it works. And yeah, I think around here is just fine. Let's see if adding a little bit of blur makes it nicer. And yes, it does. I like it much more this way. It blurs a little bit the water, and as you can see, the clouds over here, they are a little bit fuzzy and it looks nice. Interesting how the selecting of the sky really works also on the reflection here. You can see that it didn't really take over the building here, so it worked pretty good. Let's see the before and after once again. So this is the original image and this is where we are so far. Okay, so sky AI is gone. Atmosphere AI would allow me to add some fog, but I don't think it's gonna match too much this picture. Don't try to just add everything in the same picture because it just won't make sense and it'll just look terrible. So just use what really makes sense. Sun rays, for example, you cannot see the sun here, so it wouldn't make sense. Now we have dramatic, and I feel that dramatic and mystical really play against each other a little bit. So what I like to do is like I like to play a little bit to the maximum and see what it's capable of doing, and then go down to the mystical and then do the same and see which way do I think it's gonna work best. And in this case here, I really think it's the mystical, making everything, the edges a little bit more blurry, but in a very, very subtle and nice way. So I'm just going to add it until here. Let's see the before and after. So this was really, really sharp overall. And this just adds a little bit of blur and a softness to the image that looks really nice. So I'm just gonna leave it there. Now matte is something that you can actually add using the curves, but you can use it around here also. In this case, we have such a contrasty scene that I don't know if it makes too much sense to add matte, so I'm not gonna use it right now. Toning is something that I really like, in which it allows you to add color to the shadows and to the highlights separately. And usually for this kind of scene, I would really like to add some blue to the shadows, which actually they already exist, but we can add something extra. One of the things that I don't like much here is that you have to select the color just by hovering over the slider in this part here, but it's a little bit difficult to see what you're doing. So what I recommend you to do is just like pump the saturation up all the way so that you can actually see which hue are you actually selecting. And I would go about here more or less, so that you can know what you're adding to the image. And let's see the before and after. Yeah. So it's not that easy to see, but for example, in this part over here, you have a little bit of purple from the sky. And if I just add this, you can see how it blends in a little bit of blue and it makes it look a little bit nicer. It's not that obvious, it's something very subtle, but that stacks up in the end and then makes it look so nice. Now glow is something really cool because it really analyzes the image to understand where there's some sort of source of light, and then just adds a little bit of glow like you had some sort of diffusion filter on the lens or something like that. And it does it in a very soft and nice way. So check it out. This looks a little bit dim, and with it, it just gives a little bit of extra pop to the lights. But it does add a little bit of halo around the subject here. So I wouldn't go too far. I would just go like around here more or less. And other thing that you could do is you can also add an ortho effect, which is something that normally you would have to go inside Photoshop, create another layer, and then make one blurry, the other one not, and until you can find the right balance. But here is like one slider and you just add the amount of ortho effect that you want to add to it, and it usually works pretty well. Let's see it before and after. And I really like how it is right now. Now film grain is something that I like to use, but a lot of people ask why even bother if you're actually using a high-end camera that is supposed not to capture noise. But the thing is that noise from the camera and film grain are totally different things. The noise from the camera is distracting, it can have a color cast and many other things that you don't want in your picture. But the film grain just adds a controlled amount of texture that can look really nice. So let's just add to the maximum and see what it does. So like this, of course, no way. But if you dial it down from the max, and this is something that I always recommend you to do, like to see really well an effect, just push it all the way down to see what's the maximum you can get. And then dial it back until you feel that it looks and feels normal. And let me just add about this. And let's see, without and with. And it's so subtle, but let's zoom in a little bit so that you can see a little bit better. Without and with. Check out the clouds over here. See what a subtle texture that it adds all around the corners here. That doesn't distract us, but gives us a little bit of texture in the sky that just looks really, really nice. Okay, so if this one, I think we're good. Let's just look at the before and after once again. This is where we began. And this is where we are right now. Okay, now let's go to the professional tab down here. And we have first super contrast that I usually like to use when there's some sort of haloing around the subject. And you can manage the contrast of highlights, midtones, and shadows separately. So I really like to play with the highlights contrast to see if we can make it a little bit softer, this transition between highlights and midtones. And like this, I already think it looks pretty good. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. And color harmony, after we already played a lot with the HSL sliders, there's not like much to do, but one thing that I like to play with is the split color warmth that allows you to make the image much warmer, make the warmer tones warmer, or make them a little bit more dim. And in this case that we're trying to create some color contrast, I think it looks really good to just add a little bit. And for me that looks just fine. So let's see again the before and the after. Okay, so far, massive transformation. Now, one last step that I like to do, coming back to the develop module and then checking if there's something that I can still tweak it a little bit to make this image pop even more. And one thing that I think we could do here is to maybe add a little bit on the whites and just open up the picture a little bit more. And one other thing would be, let's see how it looks with and without. Okay, it definitely improves a little bit, but it made the halo around here a little bit worse. So one thing we can do is we can come back to the edits, we can go back to the Sky AI, and there's the global slider over here that really helps with this. So I'm just gonna go extreme and it pushes in a little bit. And if you go out, you see the halo much worse. So I'm just gonna go very slowly until it gets better. So let's say around here more or less. And the moment we go back, now all the changes are gonna be applied again to the image. It just takes a while. And voila, let's see again the before and the after. All right, so mostly what I would do to edit a picture is this. And now what you could do is going back through the edits tab and check everything once again to see if you can tweak a little bit more the sliders and have an even more pleasant outcome. And if you really want to go deep into the edit, you could do also some local adjustments right now, like painting with the mask some specific parts of the image for it to be brightened or darkened, adding a little bit more pop to each subject individually if you wanted, and also removing some of the things that are unwanted, like some of the things down here on the left, and also trying to remove some of the things like people or other elements, for example, if you feel that they are distracting. In this case here, I don't think so. So I'm not gonna try to do anything about that, but it's something else that you could check depending on which picture you're editing. I'm going to leave the raw file of this image in the description below, so you can download it, edit, and tag me on Instagram or Twitter @flyhenry so that I can see how it ended up. And there's 1 million ways that you can edit the same picture. This is just the way that I would do it. Alright, thanks so much for watching this tutorial, kind of like edit with me style of video. And if you have any comments or questions, just pop them in the comment section below. I answer everyone that posts something over there, and it's really cool to interact with you guys. So I'll see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao! Hey, thanks again for watching, and if you want, you can check out YouTube's recommendation right here, which is also from my photo editing playlist in this channel. Ciao, ciao!